So actually, before we talk about content source, I just want to review what we've been talking about here. So far, what is it? What is the book? It's printed on paper mostly. What is has pass along value? We stick it in the libraries. It's pretty permanent. Reading a book engages your imagination like almost nothing else. There are books that are repositories of cultural shift ideas, revolutionary ideas that have changed the world. Talked about books and education, books and censorship, banning and burning books as symbols, and now we're about to do multimedia content source that are supplied by books. And then we'll go and talk about kind of the development of books and the history of books, the business, convergence, etc. Okay, content source. When I was in 5th grade in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I liked to climb trees, and some other kid was after me with some kind of squirt gun. I was climbing a tree, and I don't remember anything else. I woke up in the hospital with a broken right wrist and a fractured collarbone. I'd had a concussion falling out of the tree. I had a wonderful teacher that year, Mrs. Daniels. I'll never forget Mrs. Daniels, 5th grade, Ann Arbor, Northside Elementary School. The class gave me The Hobbit. So I was in 5th grade. I guess I was around 11 or 12. I liked to read. I was a big reader as a kid, big reader. I ate The Hobbit up. That was like the best. And then I found The Lord of the Rings in 6th grade and ate that up too. Well, guess what? They were pretty amazing sources for movies. The Hobbit made a very bad animated film, very bad. Maybe Ralph Bakshi was involved in it, but boy, once computer graphics, computer effects could be done, and a brilliant director got hold of it. Well, first it was Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, and then The Hobbit. Unfortunately, the film of The Hobbit was turned into a trilogy, and a lot of things that weren't even in the book were included. So I remember once The Onion ran a headline, something about reviewing the film Hobbit, how they managed to make a whole 2-hour film out of Bilbo packing to go off with the dwarves. Anyway, books as a source for multimedia ideas. We talked about Rosemary's Baby before it was a book by an author, Ira Levin. There is supposedly the building, the Dakota, that it was filmed in New York City, and you can see it now. It's on 72nd, Central Park West. The Dakota was the building of Rosemary's Baby. It was also, by the way, the building John Lennon was shot in front of and killed, because he and his wife Yoko Ono had several apartments there, and he was killed there in 1980, walking into the building after a recording session. The Dakota, so named because it was built in the 1880s, and it was so far west, it was called the Dakotas. The book was made into a film, Rosemary's Baby, and I have some kind of post there. I suggest you look at it. The Origins of Rosemary's Baby, for Ira Levin, the author. Books as source. As I said before, when we talked about that very interesting young black writer, lives down south, agents in the business, once you've got an agent, you're well on your way to something good, because the agent gets a percentage of the revenue or the deals that the agent can negotiate for you if you're the author. And the agent goes to the publishing houses and the entertainment agencies and the movie studios and is selling publishing rights and film rights at almost the same time. So if you've got a great idea, you write the book first, and then the film or the TV series comes from there. So again, this is now what we've done. We've done the first section. Now we're going to talk about development. I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to keep going for a little bit. Okay, development of books. Scrolls were among the first books. Here's our Book of the Dead. I googled Book of the Dead, and here you can see this is on a scroll. Describe Hunefer's heart being weighed on the scale of Mot against the feather of truth by the jackal-headed Anubis. The ibis-headed Thoth, scribe of the gods, records the result on the way to the underworld. Early book, Papyrus, 1150 before current times. Here's a piece of an early papyrus scroll that still exists. Remember, we talked about papyrus being a plant-based paper. This is, we're not going to do the video, but this is papyrus growing along, I think, the Nile River. These are the plants that the Egyptians could turn into a type of paper they could write on and make scrolls out of. Parchment is another early kind of paper made from skins of sheep, calves, and goats, and used as a writing medium for over 2,000 years. Here's one of the caves where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found when we talk about early books. Again, very dry. Some Arab shepherds, found these scrolls, and they kind of floated around for years before people even knew what they were. Here are some of the Dead Sea Scrolls on parchment. Here's an example of a piece in some of the writing. Again, these are fragments of Bible, books of the Bible, and all kinds of religious-oriented writing. Here's another kind of scroll. These are Chinese scrolls with their beautiful writing. So let's go on here in terms of the development of books. So after scrolls and parchment and papyrus, after that part of the ancient world, after the fall of Rome, in the Western world, we have something called the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. This is, AD, but it's 400, 500 AD, 800, 1000 AD. And books tended to be kept by either very rich nobles or in monasteries by monks. And they not only kept them, but they made them. This is an ancient monastery from the Middle Ages in Greece. It's called Matera. This is a fairly recent picture, built on top of this kind of an outcropping, which meant that people in there, if they played their cards right, could stay fairly safe. It's a little hard to go out for a cup of coffee or a pack of cigarettes, but so books were kept safe in citadels, in religious citadels. And in a way, these monks, these people of the church, were like beacons of light, beacons of knowledge in the Dark Ages, keeping books and learning alive. They did, the monks, in addition to keeping volumes of books, and here we're getting away from scrolls, we're getting now into pages of books, a different kind of format. This is an example of an illustrated manuscript done by a monk. Beautiful, hand-lettered, hand-drawn on paper and ink books, or parchment, I should say, and ink books. This is before Gutenberg. These book is a one-at-a-time object. Here's another book, an illuminated manuscript, it's called, from the Middle East. with a Muslim background. So another example of around the same time period, a beautiful illuminated manuscript from Islam. So they kept the knowledge too. It's an old book, old heavy book. Books in the U.S. This is from the textbook, 1638, first printing press. Whole book of Psalms is printed. You had to have paper. In this case, it wasn't parchment, it was real paper that was being used, and so paper manufacturing had to be set up. Stamp Act involved putting stamps on printed matter. It was designed to control expression in increasingly restless colonies. Pamphlets, and you saw Tom Paine's pamphlet earlier as one of the books that changed the world. Common Sense. After the War of Independence, printing became central to cultural life in major cities. So printing was it. Books, newspapers primarily. Books were expensive. It was a luxury. So someone like Thomas Jefferson having a large library, only the rich man could have even one book. And then moving along the history of books, the linotype machine, offset lithography, made it possible to print from photographic plates, all these things. Of course, electricity before that. Didn't invent electricity, we invented ways to apply it. So printing got faster and cheaper. Novels were written, fiction, non-fiction, and a novel is fiction. Dime novels in 1860, 4 million volumes. Pulp. Now, pulp novels, this is Charles Dickens, a British writer, but a famous novelist. And here's him. Remember how we said that a book, an author didn't require much to write a book, a pen and paper and ink. That's what we see Dickens using here. Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, Great Expectations, Little Dorrit. Wonderful, wonderful novels that were often serialized in magazines and then came out as a whole book. And he was also very popular in the U.S. He toured and lectured in the U.S. and made extra money by doing that. Whoop. Here are some of these dime novels, I guess you could say. These are about the West, Buffalo Bill, the Buckskin King, the Amazon something in the West. Okay, so these are paperback dime novels. Paperback books got more popular. Penguin Books, 1935. Today, majority are sold are paperbacks. Half their revenues generated from paperbacks. There's the paperback on the left. And a hardcover of a similar vein, different author on the right. Catcher in the Rye was a paperback book. I think this is the hardcover of it, now that I look at it. But Catcher in the Rye, I believe, was published first as a paperback. I think that's what the textbook says. I don't know if you've read this book. Kind of what can I say? I'm not going to say the Bible of youthful, mid-20th century disenchantment, something like that. Here are a bunch of detective books by this guy, Nicky Spillane. These were probably very cheap. A lot of these were in the 60s. Anyway, paperback books. So we're going to talk a little bit, or I'm going to show you a video about printing now. So we're going to stop, but we basically have done the history of books pretty much up to a little before the present, because we haven't really talked too much about ebooks or audiobooks. We're going to do that in a minute. But now we're going to talk about today's printing process.